Hello, everybody. The fight is real, and the answer should always be simple. If you want a future for South Africa, the mantra is straightforward: educate, educate, educate. South Africa has fought a bitter battle of ending apartheid. During apartheid, you had two streams of education. You had one reserved for white South Africans and another called Bantu education. And Bantu education simply prepared young people to be workers on farms, and that's why it became important for them to learn Afrikaans, etc. And so when we triumphed as a nation to say we wanted one singular education system, we managed to achieve access to education. But what we didn't want is an education system that lowers the standard. We wanted an education system that will make sure South Africans can compete with anyone in the world. And so we've been through multiple iterations of this issue. But when we sit here today, the government has insisted on defending a policy where ultimately they are saying a young person can be proficient in a subject at 30%. Now, I'm not here to distort facts by saying that all you need to pass matric is 30%. I know to get a national senior certificate, you need to get 40% in your home language, second language, and another subject. And then you can get 30% for other three subjects and you're deemed proficient. And the government will argue strongly that this policy only affects 189 learners. So it's a small population of people who are ultimately passing at this level. So if it's that small, I wonder what would happen were we to increase the pass mark to 35%, then to 50%. I fear the government worries about that as a policy position because it believes in and of itself that that would significantly impact the total number of what they would call their matric pass rate for a particular class. It would demonstrate the fact that actually, when you look at that number, where I think last year was 82% of citizens who sat down for matric actually passed, what they're not telling you is that 40% of the learners dropped out. What they're not telling you that in maths and science and core subjects, when you assess it at 30%, more pass, 67% pass, but actually when you assess it at 50%, only 30% of our learners ultimately end up passing at that level. So it tells a story about the fact that the protection of the 30% is to beef up this fictitious matric number. It also tells you that actually the majority of our learners aren't able to pass with a matric that allows them to go compete and enter university. And they will continue to argue to say, well, we don't have enough university spaces anyways, so why do we prepare young people for that? And I am pained by that. First and foremost, this is why this debate is important for me. The first thing is that I believe in our young people. I think our young people are great. I think they can do better. They prove so when you send them to an IEB school or independent schools. They show the fact that no one there accepts the fact that you can pass at 30%. And so they work hard and they achieve. But it's your belief. It's the belief in the young person. It's the belief in the fact that if you up the standards, young people rise up to reach it. The second issue is the fact that, yes, there are many issues to fix in education. And I would agree that, of course, we must focus on ECD centers and make sure every learner comes in to be able to get a decent ECD so that by the time they hit the age of 10, they're able to read for meaning. Unlike the current statistic at the moment where 8 out of 10 of our children cannot read for meaning. So yes, we must fix primary school education. But thirdly, we must ensure that we capacitate teachers, because the reason why the government is not often willing to move on this issue, they know that teachers in classrooms, certain unionized teachers, sometimes have a preference that the standard be 30% because then they demonstrate that they are passing learners. But that can't be so. I would urge union leaders, anybody, to say, let's up the standards and ask the teachers to up the standards. But what is also masked is the fact that the Department of Education has left over 31,000 posts vacant. They can't fill them due to budget cuts and multiple issues. And secondly, many of those, 17,000 of those posts are teaching posts. Then there are deputy principal posts and there are administrative posts. They're not filling them, and therefore it impacts the quality of education. In quintile 1, 2, and 3, we're already seeing classroom sizes balloon. They give the national average of 1 to 35, but when you go to poor communities, that number goes significantly higher. So, yes, fix for classroom numbers, fix for funding in that space, fix for infrastructure. I was in the Eastern Cape, and it's clear that there are still deficits in how we fix our education system, how we ensure that ultimately schools are adequate for young people to learn, sanitation is adequate for them to use decent bathrooms and go to school. We have to fix those. But we are fixing those with a goal in mind. And the goal is this, is that actually every child who comes through the schooling system of South Africa has got choice at the end of their national senior certificate. And these are the choices. At first, of course, they can go to a TVET college and accelerate their skill, because not every child is actually going to be academically inclined in that manner. They're able to do mechanics, become great chefs. And these are important vocational skills that we need in our economy. But in that TVET college, we know that the throughput level is quite low. So those who start don't always finish. So what we have to do is send them there with a requisite pass mark of over 50%, even at grade 10, so that they know that they are confident enough to compete with anyone. The second is, if you pass young people at 50%, they can compete with university spaces. And not all universities are local. They have international universities. There are online courses. The future of the world is digitization. So whilst now we're arguing the space constraint by saying that there aren't enough universities, but we mustn't keep ourselves locked into that. We must think about the world and say, what opportunities are we presenting to our young people and where can they go? The third is the choice for them to go find work. If you have a 50% pass mark, I would argue you've got the confidence and a skill to sell. The majority of people who are unemployed are people with a matric or less than that. And in the main, it's because they don't have always the skill that they can deploy to the economy. So this debate is about how do we exercise that choice that a young person can go to work. But that lastly, it's a personal issue. I would never accept my child coming home with a 30% pass mark. Why are we accepting it for any other child in this country? There are many political parties who say, no, abahambe and this and that. We are asking our children, when there are immigrants who come here seeking employment, and many of them are teachers, all of that, for our young people who have passed at 30% to suddenly compete. For our young people who at primary school could not read for meaning, now suddenly they are passing extraordinarily well just because we've lowered the standards. We have to ask better of ourselves. We have to build and make sure a young person who starts school is able to compete. We have to make sure they go to a school with decent infrastructure, a library. We have to make sure that that young person is able to be conversant and competent in a digital economy. These are the fights we have to maintain and we have to make sure we achieve if we're going to rewrite the script of apartheid. Or else, this is the difficult part, is that those with money in this country end up sending their kids to quintile 5 schools or private schools. And there's been a significant rise in the number of independent and private schools. So what then happens is that there, the quality of education does not accept 30%. It passes young people at a much higher level. So if you're wealthy, you can get a good education. But if you're poor and you're in quintile 1, 2, and 3, and you are wholly at the mercy of government, it means your education remains fundamentally poor and leading you to a space of high unemployment. Aren't we replicating the past we thought we defeated by creating another duality born not only out of class, but out of economic standards? Fellow South Africans, we cannot accept this. Now, Parliament will vote today, and parties will have a right to declare whether they believe in your child or they don't, whether they believe it's okay to keep this 30% thing because it suits the minister or they don't. Now, we are willing to go and fight and take whatever lessons, whatever action we need to take. Because at the end of the day, I truly believe lifting the standards does not mean more children are going to fail. It means lifting the standards means we want the system to stop failing our young people so that the system can up the levels. If I want to compete at anywhere in the world, whether it be if I wanted to go to the Olympics and run a 100-meter race, and they say that for men to qualify it's 10 seconds, those are the standards. I can't say because the system is stacked up against me, I haven't eaten enough, I don't have whatever resources I need, etc., etc. They must make the standards 15 seconds. It's not how the world works. The world sets a mark and it wants us to compete. And I've thought to the Minister of Basic Education, why are we so adamant at defending this issue? What is the material damage that could happen if we were to increase the requirement? What would be the damage? And this is an answer I don't know. My suspicions lead me to a place where it says, well, we just keep our matric pass rate rising and we can pat ourselves at the back when we really allow young people to enter the long line of unemployment. Fellow South Africans, now is the time to act. And I don't come at this in any other way other than making a simple plea. Let political parties vote on this issue. We can begin the adjustments progressively. We can work with the impediments that come our way. But we can make this a nation of South Africans who are educated, who can compete. Because what is true freedom at the end of the day? Surely true freedom is not having a child whose competence leads them to do, if you like, only menial tasks in an economy that's digitizing. True freedom must mean that young people will become lawyers, doctors, teachers, professionals, and people who are in the services sectors and vocationally well-trained. That's what true freedom is. It's the exercise of choice. Let's give that to our young people by upping standards, holding our teachers to accountable, starting with the Minister of Basic Education to make sure that our education isn't basic at 30%, that our education is basic at 50%, and therefore we can achieve a future for South Africa. I love our kids. I want them to do better. Let political parties tell you why not.